Hello and welcome into the Cubs on Deck podcast. I am one of your hosts. My name is Greg Huss, and today I am joined by my co-host Brian Smith. Brian, how are you doing over there in the midst of some Little League season action?
Yeah, we're deep in that. I'm like more concerned with the pitch counts of 9-year-olds than I am with
Mm.
with what's going on with Cubs pitching prospects right now. But it'll come back around, and I guess as far as the pro baseball thing goes, it's been the week that bat tracking stats have come out on Baseball Savant, so it's mostly just been fun to kind of go back through guys that were prospects at one point and think about what I thought of their bat speed, and now we have like a real number behind it. I don't know how much of this stuff actually matters, but it's kind of fun. It's more than anything, I think it's just sort of fun to compare dudes with.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think there's a lot of like Statcast data that is fun and also matters, and not that like bat speed doesn't matter, but also I feel like that's a great example of guys get it done in a lot of different ways,
Yeah,
right? Where
exactly.
you're seeing like Luis Arias down like he has the slowest bat speed in all of baseball, and he's like the hit king in terms of baseball in this era. It's like I don't know, it's you got to take it all with the and on the other end of the spectrum, like right, Stanton is the fastest bat speed, which we knew. Like if there's any like
That was the
Statcast
lock.
stats, that was a lock. Like if
Yeah.
you could predict before it came out, like Stanton being number one is probably the king. I mean, like Morel and Canario kind of top of the list for the Cubs, and that makes
Makes
sense,
total
right?
sense. Yeah.
I think we kind of saw that with Morel when he was still in South Bend, which is fun.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that was one of the things you would always say about him, it was the bat speed. So that's
Yeah.
fun.
That's the one thing where like I know that if whenever someone reaches out, it's like, oh, did you see this? Meaning like the power that Christopher Morel is showing at the major league level. Like, did you see this coming when he was a prospect? Like, of course, I can't say like yes. Like, I can't say that I saw this happening. But like, I always point to say like, yeah, but like I knew he had bat speed back then. It was just a matter of like that bat speed translating to actual power in
Right.
major league games, which was like there was a long that was a long shot. Like there he was a long ways away from like translating bat speed to major league power, and he somehow made it work. I mean, prospecting is pretty imperfect.
Yeah, I mean, so much of Chris's story, I think, is how the weight he put on helped like bring the power to life, and and then his own just incredible ability to improve. Where I didn't think he'd make enough contact to be able to sort of get the at bats necessary to hit this many home runs, but he's doing it mostly because he just got better at hitting the baseball more consistently, or consistently enough to make the whole package work.
Let's go from Christopher Morel infielder to a couple other infielders where I mean I tweeted out right before we came on like this show we have one topic. We have one topic of discussion the entire show long. We'll see how long we can chat about these two guys. We're talking about Matt Shaw and Jefferson Rojas, which is fun. I mean, I think last time you and I recorded, you just kind of threw out there middle of the episode. You're like, we should run through and just kind of go tool by tool run through Matt Shaw versus Jefferson Rojas, and I was like, you know what, that sounds like a good plan. So here we are today. We're gonna be basically Matt Shaw versus Jefferson Rojas. Now, us doing that, like I'm not taking Rojas and you're taking Shaw, or vice versa. Like we're just talking about these guys in general, and we're not pitting them against each other really. I mean, like we're gonna be comparing and contrasting these dudes, but like we're just really happy that these two players are in the Cubs farm system together. But I don't know, dude. How do you want to lead this off? How do you want to lead off the conversation surrounding Matt Shaw versus Jeff? We'll get into item by item in terms of their skills, but like, how when you think these two players, what do you think about in this Cubs farm system?
Yeah, I mean, I think what is interesting to me about them is that if we just like look back 12 months ago, Matt Shaw is just a guy that's rumored to go in the first round in a pretty wide range of picks. And Jefferson Rojas is a guy that you probably heard a little bit about, got $1 million bonus, was doing some good things on backfields, but really off the radar. So these two guys are pretty new to the majority of Cubs fans. I mean, they're still new to us, I feel like. And so it's kind of easy to just sort of get caught in the hamster wheel of like the two scouting reports like that come out at the very beginning and just take those as sort of gospel. But like I thought if we just really sort of dug into each tool and talked about how these two guys sort of get to end results similarly, but in different ways, it might just sort of help inform sort of our current scouting reports on each guy.
Yeah, and before we get into each of these, it's worth pointing out that Jefferson Rojas is now a top 100 prospect according to both Baseball America and MLB Pipeline. MLB Pipeline just updated their rankings as well, their top 100, and the Cubs have 8 top 100 prospects, which is crazy.
Yeah.
The most of any team, and 2 more than the second most. So yeah, they're with eight players there. And Jefferson Rojas, I believe, is already on the Just Baseball top 100 as well. So
Yep.
these are 2 top 100 guys. More times than not, we're seeing Matt Shaw ranked above Jefferson. I think actually every time, not more times than not, we're seeing Matt Shaw ranked above Jefferson Rojas. I guess let's lead off with where do you have these guys ranked? Not necessarily like you're set in stone, but generally, do you have these guys ranked? Who do you have ranked above the other guy? Where do you have them as far as in the system? Where do you view these guys from a macro looking at the entire system?
Yeah, I mean, I think going into the year, I would have had them on different tiers.
Okay.
They're both top 10 prospects to me, but Matt Shaw would have been in that top tier. Kind of in the PCA Horton, and then he's right there with I had Owen Casey really high as well. And then Rojas to me was in that next tier, sort of, which is still a really good prospect, like sort of the James Triantos level tier. I think what has changed this year for me is, if you look at Jefferson's overall numbers, they're not going to blow you away. But I think just like the maturity he's shown, just like playing above water in high A at his age, has just sort of convinced me that he is sort of closer to that top tier than I thought going into the year. So I think they're really close. I mean, that's in a lot of ways that, that's what this conversation I think will help inform is like, am I ready to start saying that maybe Rojas is a better prospect than Shaw? Is it, I guess how crazy would that comment be? I think is the interesting conversation to have here.
Yeah, I had these guys ranked with before the season with Rojas 5, Shaw 6,
Okay.
but essentially the same. I mean,
Yeah.
they're the same. I had them ranked behind obviously PCA and Cade, and then behind Owen Casey and Kevin Alcantara. Now, I think that, in my opinion, that 3, 4, 5, 6, right? The Owen Casey, Kevin Alcantara, Matt Shaw, and Jefferson Rojas. If you put those 4 guys in any which way, I would not. I have no legitimate argument against any order. You can't make an argument against
Essentially
it. So
tied in your mind. Yeah.
they're tied. They're tied. And so, yeah, I think that for me, this conversation is less is Jefferson passing Matt Shaw, and more it's just let's just talk. I'd love to just talk out like why I have these guys ranked so similarly, and make sure it's legit. Make sure that Matt Shaw and Jefferson Rojas both belong here where they're at. So let me go ahead and start off by running through their current stat line this season. We're going to be talking about more than just their stat line this season, but let me go and start with their stat lines, and then we'll get into their tools here. So I'll start with Matt Shaw, who this year is playing in his age, or I guess right now he's 22.5 years old. He's halfway through his age 22 season. He is in Double-A Tennessee. He is about a year and a half younger than league average at that Double-A Southern League level. He has recorded 130 plate appearances with a 204 batting average, pretty low, but an on-base percentage that's pretty high at 354. He's slugging 340. That is good for an OPS of 694. Where he is performing differently than we expected coming into the year are the strikeout and walk numbers kind of here. He's got a strikeout rate of 22% and a walk rate of almost 17% this season. So flipping over to Jefferson Rojas, honestly, pretty similar numbers, overall numbers, but he goes about it in a different way, right? He's playing his age 19 season. He just turned 19 years old. He is in high A at South Bend in the Midwest League, where he is a little more than 3 years younger than league average. So he's considerably one of the youngest compared to league average in the entire system. He's got 132 plate appearances this year, where he's got a 275 batting average, an on base percentage of 318, a slugging of 358, which is good for a 677 OPS. He is striking out 16% of the time and walking 5%. So overall, both these guys have a sub 700 OPS. The thing I want to point out about those overall OPS numbers, those slash lines for those guys, is that Matt Shaw is playing in the Southern League, which is basically the equivalent to playing in the Carolina League this year. The offensive numbers are extremely hard to come by this season. His 694 OPS, Matt Shaw's, is good for a 107 OPS plus. So he's still hitting above league average, even though he has a sub 700 OPS, versus Jefferson Rojas, who's just slightly below him with a 677 OPS, has an OPS plus of 96, which is below average for the league. So that's just a little bit of context in terms of like the league that they're playing in and the offensive kind of profile for each of these guys. I think that the main thing we pointed out before we started recording is like really these guys are not having great offensive years overall across the board.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, certainly not for guys that, get a lot of that top 100 talk. And, Rojas, who's been this huge riser, we're still talking about a guy who has been below his league average offensively. Now, add in all the context of his age and stuff, and things just keep looking better and better. And we're going to talk through his strengths a lot more than we're going to talk through his weaknesses. But the other thing I guess I'll point out is just their sort of biographic information as we start to compare them. Matt Shaw is listed, both guys, right-handed hitters, right-handed throwers. Matt Shaw is listed at 5'9", 185 pounds. That feels right to me. I think his measurement would have happened less than a year ago when he was drafted. So, we probably added a little bit of muscle, but, nothing much. Rojas, on the other hand, is listed at 5'11", 150 pounds. That 150 pounds, that's not true anymore. He gets measured essentially when he gets to the complex in the Dominican after he signs. It is just not the case anymore. If you look at Rojas, he's put on a significant amount of weight over the last 2 years. I think this year, especially, his lower half has a lot more weight. I would guess probably 170 to 180 pounds, somewhere in there would be my more current guess for where Rojas is. So, not too dissimilarly sized, but, I do think there are some differences that will come up as we start to talk about their different skill sets.
You want to dig right into the hit tool first?
The big one. Sure. Yeah.
The big one. I might as well start off at the top, which I think that entering this season, and I think the more notoriety goes towards Matt Shaw's hit tool. I think that when he was being drafted, that was the thing that everybody talked about first. And that's the thing that we've continued to talk about since he was drafted, is that hit skill is very impressive, that he does not swing and miss hardly ever, which is still the case. He's still got a swinging strike rate, does Matt Shaw, we're looking at a swinging strike rate of 7.3%, which is one of the best in the entire organization. We talked about that a couple weeks ago. But really, Jefferson Rojas has not been too bad either, right? He's got the batting average that's sitting 275. He's got a batting average of? Yeah, 275 batting average. He's got a swinging strike rate of only 9%, which is also one of the best in the farm system. So I think this kind of debate back and forth between Shaw and Rojas in terms of their hit tool is a lot closer than we kind of assumed coming into the season. And that's all credit to Jefferson Rojas, because I think that Matt Shaw is what we thought he would be.
Right.
But Jefferson Rojas has really showed that, like, hey, I'm here too.
I mean, we're talking about their two biggest strengths here when we talk about the hit tool. Like that, what they share in common, I think, is that like what they're best at right now is their ability to find the ball, and like once they start swinging, like even if they start swinging and it's a bad pitch, like still being able to sort of adjust with their hands and get there. I thought, maybe it'd be useful to talk through their swings a little bit in this section, talk through sort of the visual aspect of it. I watched some video today to sort of have it on the top of mind. So I can give a brief sort of description here. I mean, both guys um, feature big like steps forward with their left legs that they use as timing mechanisms. Shaw's is much bigger. I think the Cubs are trying to quiet it a little bit. But if you see videos of Matt at Maryland, or even some in spring training this year, like he takes a big step forward. I know Brendan Miller, friend of the show, has compared it to Dustin Pedroia before. Like if you think through that, that's sort of what Matt Shaw is doing there. Jefferson also does it, but it's much more subtle. He is also just using sort of almost like a somewhere between a step and a toe tap as a timing mechanism to sort of initiate his swing. I think the big difference that I see in their swings is that Rojas, I feel like his swing really comes from his back hip. I think he uses his legs really well for someone his age. Like I think that's really advanced. Shaw to me is like his hands are so quick, and to me, like his hands are really like what jumps out to me in his swing more than his lower half. He's very strong in his lower half, and he's able to sort of use that to produce the power he does from his size. But to me, like his swing is much steeper than Rojas's is, and it's just hand speed that jumps off the screen. Where Rojas, I think the hands are a product of the lower half. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I honestly, I'm glad you described that, because that's way better than I could ever describe it. I guess the simplest way that it doesn't describe what they're doing exactly, but when I'm looking at Matt Shaw, that is, when you're looking at it at his top half, that's kind of like what you teach kids to do. Like that's what, when you're teaching kids how to hit, it's like watch his hands and do that. Like do that with your hands. Now, when you look at Jefferson Rojas, you're looking at his entire body and how he's hitting as a whole, and you're like, do that. You know what I mean? It looks more, I guess, more fluid. Does Jefferson Rojas, which is kind of crazy considering that Matt Shaw is the pure hitter that came out of college and is 22 to 21, 22 years old, versus Jefferson Rojas is still this young kid, this young 19-year-old. And he has, in my eyes, like the prettier swing, does Jefferson Rojas over Matt Shaw. Now, Matt Shaw's might be more efficient and more sustainable long term, but Jefferson Rojas, I want to watch Jefferson Rojas' swing all day. And I'll point out too that when Jefferson Rojas made his way up to Myrtle Beach last year, when he finally made it up there, which was actually not too deep into the year, that's the exact reason why I like to wait. I prefer, I don't a lot of times, but I prefer to wait to really like be aggressive in my rankings of players, or speak on these players too much until I get eyes on them on MILB TV, because all you had to do was watch how he swings the bats and how simple, for the most part, his approach is up there, and just how good he looks to be like, like I don't care what the numbers are. Like he looks good. He looks way older than 18 years old, both because of his body and because of the way he's swinging. And that's what really stood out to me with Jefferson Rojas. He was putting up good numbers last year in Myrtle, but really it was everything else about Jefferson Rojas that stood out. And that's what makes that hit tool play.
The other thing that jumps out to me about the swing is, when and if you look at the Cubs draft picks last year, I think this is something that maybe they're thinking they're ahead on organizationally. Matt Shaw is really closed in his swing with his front shoulder. And a bunch of the guys they drafted last year, that's true for. And, I guess we can sort of, anyone can sort of think through why that might be the case. I think like that sort of creates some whip in the body once you come through if your shoulder's still closed. But what that does for Matt more than anything is like he is geared to be an all fields hitter, but he's like his shoulder positions him to hit the ball to right field most naturally. If he's like lets his hands go, the bat is going to take the ball towards right field. Where Rojas, I think, is a much more sort of traditional swing, where like his bat is going to get on plane, he's going to sort of meet the pitch where he meets the pitch is going to dictate where he hits it. Shaw, I think, is like sort of more deliberately able to sort of pick where he's going to hit it. And oftentimes, like, he goes to the plate clearly, very clearly thinking right center all the time.
Okay, so like with Shaw, is it one of those situations where say he squares up his stance, right? So he has a closed off stance to the pitcher. So his
Yep.
his left foot is closer to the plate than his right foot versus Jefferson Rojas is about even.
Yep.
He maybe slightly open, but really he's pretty much even at the plate. If Matt Shaw opened up his stance to make it more even, what do you think that would do to his? Because right now he's going the opposite way with 46% of his hits, which has come down. I know
Right.
a few weeks ago it was like 58%, which is a ridiculous number. If he squared that off, do you think that he'd hit fewer opposite field? Is that just a product of his stance?
To me, I don't think it's so much about before the pitch as much as when he's making contact, his front shoulder is more in towards
Mm,
home plate than the majority of hitters. And
hmm.
so, I mean, for him to pull the ball, it's all going to be a product of like contact point. If he catches it early enough, he can pull it. But other than that, everything in his body is working towards right center. Rojas, I think, um, it's going to be more natural where like there's nothing sort of counteracting. Um, like it's still like contact point is still going to matter with him, but nothing's fighting against it. If he's early on the pitch, it's only going to left field.
Yeah.
Where Shaw, I just think his hit approach is so like it's just he was taught in college you hit to right center and it guides everything he does. And like there are hitters that every hitter pretty much in professional baseball, if you talk to them, are like, I'm an opposite gap hitter. Like I have an opposite gap mindset. No, you don't. You are lying to yourself, but like, hey, if that's what helps you get it done, that's fine. Matt Shaw is like he's living his truth. And
Yeah.
so I think like that's the big difference for them. Like Rojas has shown this year he is able to hit the ball to right field.
Yes.
I like it's not a weakness for him. He's not a dead pull hitter by any means. But Shaw, I think, is like much more oriented towards like he's a problem for pitchers on the outer half of the plate because he's just ready to go there.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean Rojas 35% opposite field for him too, which is a decent
yep.
decent percentage. He uses the opposite field very very well too. You want to transition that a little bit to the power tool because
Yeah.
I think that this specifically for Matt Shaw is kind of a good conversation to have because of that opposite field. I think that we have now very quickly transitioned from this past offseason saying, man, Matt Shaw really knows how to go to the opposite field and he can do it with power. So
Mm-hmm.
now we're saying he's going to the opposite field so much, maybe he's not showing off that power like we know he can to the pull side. I think that both players have decent power, especially for the levels they're at right now, right? Across the board, I mean, they're below average slug right now in terms of stats this year, right? The 358 slug for Rojas, the 340 slug for Matt Shaw. That's not exactly ideal. 2 homers for Rojas, 3 homers for Matt Shaw. Not great, right?
But you can
But
make, I think what you're saying is you can make the argument that their future power grade could be above average.
I think so for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. What are your thoughts on
Yeah.
that?
Yeah. I mean, Matt Shaw, hits for a lot of power in college. And so, I think the power grades that you saw in the draft last year were generally pretty positive because you're talking about a guy who did it like on the field last year. And, that was my question coming into the year is like, how much is that going to translate to like, I guess wood bats, although that can get, that specific conversation can get overrated, and just be like, will that hitting approach allow him to find enough of it? Will pitchers be jamming him inside enough to that he's just like sort of inside outing the ball? Are the Cubs going to be able to like help him access that? I think that's a worthy question. What Matt's really good at, and I think the reason that you believe that they're like the power is going to work, and this is another thing that he has in common with Dustin Pedroia, is he is so good at understanding leverage and tilt in his shoulders. He uses his shoulders to create leverage. That's what you have to do if you're 5'9" to create any power. Is you have to sort of lean into like your backside and get it from back there. Rojas, what's interesting to me about his power is just the way that lower half is adding weight. I mean, he is the biggest thing that changed, I think, since he signed with the Cubs is he's just added weight way more than anyone thought he was going to be able to. And, we started this conversation with Christopher Morel. Like, there are guys that this happens to, that like their bodies mature in that age 16 to 20 range, and they end up with a different physique than even their signing scouts might have projected. And that might be happening with Rojas. And so I think we have to wonder if Rojas puts on another 20 pounds, is that going to then lead to 20 more home runs? And, I don't think his swing will hold him back from accessing that if his body allows it.
Yeah, I think that Shaw has a swing that could prevent him from having more home runs. Rojas does not at all. And I think the body shape of Rojas, that's a conversation that will probably continue over when we're talking about their fielding. But I think with Rojas, neither guy, I can't project comfortably either guy being like a 30 home run guy. I don't see that happening in the major leagues. But you're right, with Rojas being so young and his legs getting stronger and him just getting stronger in general, like, yeah, I probably bet on Rojas to have more home runs at the major league level than Matt Shaw. But that's based on that's a lot of projection. That's a lot of
I mean, if I come from the future 10 years from now and I tell you one of these guys hit 25 home runs, bet your life on who it is. Who are you picking?
Actually, I'm probably picking Matt Shaw. I'm probably picking Matt Shaw because, I mean, and that gets into the greater discussion of it all, where I feel a little bit more confident in the ceiling floor situation with Matt Shaw and like his ability to make it up to the major leagues than Jefferson Rojas. So you're banking on that a little bit, but I don't know. I just think that there's more comfortability with Matt Shaw, but I don't know, dude. I think that I see more power projection with Rojas, but to your point, I probably bet on Matt Shaw to be that 25 home run guy. If one guy had to hit it for 1 year, it's probably now. Actually, if you switch that question up and you say one of these guys hits for 25 plus home runs for 3 seasons, which first of all, that's a ridiculous, that's a great career by itself, right?
Yeah.
But if one guy does it for 3 seasons, I'm probably betting on Rojas. But if it's for 1 season, I'm betting on Shaw.
Yeah, I mean, there's a reason that scouting reports come in both like present and future grades, and Matt Shaw probably has a full, like 10 points higher in his, like a full grade higher in his present power than Rojas does. But I think if you're doing the future power grade, you could make an argument to me that Rojas might even be like a half grade higher than Shaw.
Yeah.
And so that, I think that's sort of where that's sort of the number way of saying what you're saying.
Yeah. Let's go ahead and transition. I want to kind of put a bow on their entire offensive skill and their entire hitting skill set after we talk about approach, because I know we're talking about the five tools, and oftentimes approach gets left out of that 5 tool talent, right? But it's important, and I think that a lot of times when you're talking about approach, you're talking both strikeouts and walks. But we already kind of talked about the hit tool that each of these guys have and their ability to both limit strikeouts by quite a bit. But their walk rates have been really interesting to me. So, again, before we hopped on, I mentioned that you could look at Jefferson Rojas' stat line right now. And if you told me before the season that one of these guys had that stat line where he's batting 275 with a 318 OBP, but more importantly, a 16% strikeout rate and a 5% walk rate, I would guess before the season, that that's Matt Shaw's stat line. But actually, as we're sitting here today, it's Jefferson Rojas. Matt Shaw is walking a ton, dude. He's got a walk percentage plus of 184, which is outrageous. I think it is the second best in the system. No, it is the best in the system. It's the best in the entire system in terms of him drawing walks compared to the league average. That is not something I had on my bingo card for 2024.
Yeah, I mean, even more than like his approach, I think what that speaks to is his like baseball intelligence. Like, this is a guy who went into a slump and is smart enough to understand like how can I be valuable to my team during a slump? I can just like not, I cannot swing. And like right now, when I'm in the thick of it, like that's going to be helpful to my team. I'm going to be able to find enough times to get on base with pitchers in this league that I will be productive. And that like that's not something everyone gets to. And that, I think that's one of the things we heard about Matt in the draft last year is just how baseball smart he is, how like what a student of the game he is. And that might be like when he's rolling, his walk rate's going to be under 5% for those stretches. Like when he's seeing beach balls, he's going to swing all the time. That's why like people complaining about James Triantos's walk rate right now are so funny to me. It's like, dude, if a guy's hitting 375 for 40 games, he shouldn't ever like be walking. Like
please don't walk.
Yeah. So Matt's the other end of that spectrum, and that's really great too, is that he's like able to work through this slump and still be a guy with a 118 WRC plus, and it hasn't felt like he's been on this year. So that's a huge point in Shaw's favor to me. And Rojas is just like, he's just not mature enough to have that yet. He's going to, if he thinks he can hit a pitch, he's going to swing at it. And, I don't think that there's a whole lot of like overall like massive approach happening to like consider, the count, how I've been rolling lately. Like it's just like more see ball, hit ball.
It is see ball, hit ball, but I'll point out too with Rojas that I'm not worried about the walk rate, right? I think that that's fine that he's approaching at bats that way at age 19 in high A. Like I think it's totally fair because when you watch his at bats, I'm not looking at his at bats saying like, oh man, like he's just swinging at everything. Right. He's chasing everything. I'm not saying that when I'm watching his at bats. So
no, he walked 10% of the time in the Dominican Summer League at like 16, 17 years old, and that's a league where like you get thrown a ton of really like ugly pitches. And so like what that shows me is okay, he like understands the difference between a good pitch and a bad pitch. Yes. But I think it's those sort of close pitches where like, on the edges, just off the edges, he's probably swinging too much these days.
Yeah. And projecting out future walk rates gets really, really tricky. I think that with strikeout rates, it's a lot easier. I mean, there's if you're striking out at 20% or 25% clip in AA, there's a good chance that you're going to be striking out 30+% in the major leagues or whatever that might be, right? It's much easier to look at strikeout rate that way. With walk rate, it is just there's so many different factors that go into what makes a walk rate happen. Like you said, the hot streak a guy is on, how well he's hitting, the level that he's seeing good pitches versus way out of the zone pitches versus borderline pitches, how confident he is any given day. Like again, back to Christopher Morel, he was not ever drawing walks when he was at the lower levels of the minors. He refused to walk. And now he's putting up he's got an above average walk rate in Chicago this year.
Yep.
Like you could have never predicted that. So
walks are also a function of like how threatening you are at the plate,
exactly.
Right? And so it's a function of like if Rojas does add those next 20 pounds and he becomes a guy that can hit 20, 30 home runs in a season, pitchers are going to pitch him differently. They're going to, throw a lot more just off the plate. And if he's as smart a hitter, as we think he can be, then he'll take more walks as he goes. So like these things all sort of work in tandem when you project, what somebody's going to look like in 5 years.
All right. So we've covered the hit, the pop, and the approach at the plate. How do you kind of envision these two guys? And what if you're picking a dude? I'm gonna make you pick a guy for just his offensive profile, not even just his hitting profile, not even his speed. We haven't even talked about speed or anything. Just his hitting profile. Who you got?
Yeah, I think. It's one of those where if you had to bet your life on it, I think you'd bet Matt Shaw. Yeah. And I think, if you let your sort of like dreamer, like why do we follow the minor leagues? Like to dream on players and what they could be at their best. Like, then I think you'd think Rojas. Like, yeah. Rojas coming into this year, when he came into camp and he was even bigger than he was last year, to me, that spoke a lot, where I do think now, 190, 195 pounds is possible. And that unlocks a lot of stuff to me. So I am a lot more willing to believe than ever that Rojas can get there. And so, yeah, I don't know.
You know
I
what?
mean,
It meant a lot to me. It meant a lot to me that I know he's not overall putting up great numbers, but him putting together that 17 game hit streak for South Bend, Rojas, and him coming out of the gates hot and looking comfortable in South Bend, that meant a whole lot because it kind of just confirmed. I know it was a small sample size, but I didn't need a whole lot. I didn't need to see a whole lot. It just kind of confirmed to me that like what we saw in Myrtle Beach was not a fluke, because that
yeah.
happens, right? Where we see a guy at the lowest level of the minors really show out and perform well, and it's like, all right, but that was just like one season at the lowest level. Like that's not legit who he is, and that gave me a whole lot of confidence. Like I feel, regardless of the sub 700 OPS, I feel better about Jefferson Rojas hitting today than I did 2 months ago.
I think if I wanted to talk to one person in the Cubs organization about Rojas, it wouldn't be the farm director, it wouldn't be his manager in South Bend, it would be the strength and conditioning coach. And I would just want to be like, do you think this guy, like, do you think he has more and more room to go? The more room that Rojas has to go in the eyes of a real expert in that field, the more and more that I would believe in his upside.
That's a good point.
And that to me is like where it all is going to hinge for him. And, if it's this current state, like he's not going to have enough power for it to all really matter in the end. But if he can keep growing and he can start to add power to the skills he has to just like swing and hit the ball, then I think it's going to work fabulously.
I have on my note sheet here, I have hit, power, and approach written down, and I have next to them who I give the edge to in these tools. And I have next to each of them, I have hit, Shaw, question mark, power, Shaw, question mark, approach, Shaw, question mark, because I think I give the edge in each of these right now and kind of in the future, like kind of combining that current and future tool for each of them. I think I give the edge to Shaw on each of those things. But I'm sitting here and like, Rojas though? Like,
Yeah.
I don't know. I think I'm about it. So I don't know. That's where it gets tricky. I'm like, if I'm breaking it down item by item, Shaw gets the advantage on across the board. But I still might be leaning Rojas. I don't know.
If I was like the Oakland A's or the Chicago White Sox and I was going to trade with the Cubs, I would ask for Jefferson Rojas. And if I was like the Dodgers talking to the Cubs about prospects, I would ask for Matt Shaw.
I was going to wait to ask this at the end, but you kind of segued pretty well into this. If you are the Cubs and you have to include one of these guys in a trade package for it doesn't matter who it's for, right? In any sort of trade package at this year's deadline, who are you more upset to give up? Like who would you rather hold on to? That's what it comes down to, right? That's the question at the end, and that's how. I mean, I'm sure you're the same way, but like that's essentially what it comes down to when I'm ranking these guys. Like, would I rather trade player X or would I rather trade player Y? If I would rather trade one of them, then I would rank him below the other guy. That's what it comes down to.
You got to ask me again at the end. Let's keep working through it. I'm not ready. I'm unprepared.
Let's go ahead and stay on the offensive side. Real quick here, let's just address their speed, which I think that both are there. Neither of them are blazing fast on the base paths. They are. I think that Rojas is a guy that's probably going to lose more and more speed as he continues to get bigger. I think Shaw is the goofiest runner I've ever seen, dude. He is like, I mean that in like the nice, like it's like he is so goofy when he runs. He runs so hard. It's
kind of like Nico, right? Like Nico has this like real like staccato-y like running motion. And,
yes.
And it looks really silly, but Nico's obviously super fast. Shaw's kind of similar. You could just when he's running hard, you're like, that dude's running as hard as he can run.
Yeah, he cracks me up, dude.
Yeah. But yeah, he gets it done. If I had to guess who was faster in 2030, I would guess Shaw. I like this is one that I feel somewhat confident in my response.
I'd probably guess that Shaw's faster right now. Don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, I would guess that Rojas was faster a year ago, so it's hard, but yeah, I probably would guess Shaw right now.
Yeah, I need to see more. What does Statcast use? Like the bolts? Is that what they use?
Yeah,
I need to
right.
see more bolts from Jefferson Rojas, I think. But
Yeah,
I mean, this does not necessarily mean anything. But this year, Rojas has got 5 stolen bases and 2 caught stealings. Matt Shaw has 8 stolen bases and 2 caught stealings. I think that Matt Shaw is an incredibly aggressive base runner. I mean, we're not talking Pete Crow Armstrong aggressive, but non-PCA division, I think that Matt Shaw is up there with one of the more aggressive base runners in the organization.
oh,
And
he's going for third base on like if he's on first base and the hitter
yes,
singles, like he's going for third base
yeah,
every
yeah,
time. Like, he's very pissed if he can't get it.
exactly. So I mean, Matt Shaw's just got a lot of what's the baseball equivalent of like gym rat? Like
Yeah.
he's got that. He's got the I don't know, just a dirt bag of a player, and
Yep.
that's what makes him fun to watch. But yeah, I think I'll give Matt Shaw the edge in terms of speed.
And
Maybe
overall
now,
base
definitely
running,
future.
probably.
And overall,
Yeah.
you're right. And overall base running because, like you mentioned, the baseball instincts are terrific, and he's been applauded for that since he was in early in college. So like that's something that translates. Honestly, that might be like when people talk about like, oh, like he's got baseball instincts. That applies itself maybe most like 1-for-1 to base paths, fielding too,
Yes.
but
Yes.
base paths that's a 1-for-1 translation as far
It's
as I can
base
see.
pass and it's first step on defense. Those are the
Yeah.
two, I think, biggest ones.
Yeah. All right, let's go to fielding, which is we've already kind of hinted at it throughout here, but it's kind of an interesting setup with both these guys. So Matt Shaw, obviously, I think he was technically drafted as a shortstop, right? I mean, he played shortstop in college.
Right.
He played shortstop his first pro season last year while also bouncing around a little bit. He spent almost his entire time at third base. He's gotten a few games in at second base as well this year, I believe, but spent most of his time at third base this year. Versus Jefferson Rojas has been predominantly a shortstop during his pro career. A
Right.
few innings at second base here and there, but for the most part, he has been at shortstop. But I think that Rojas is a guy we could easily see move off if he continues to get bigger and stronger over to third base or over to second base. Versus Matt Shaw's already kind of at that point, right, where he's already off short. So they're both infielders, but I think neither are probably long term shortstops. Maybe do you see Rojas staying there?
I really don't. I mean,
Yeah,
at least the Rojas that we dream on, like being an all-star player, to me probably isn't a shortstop all-star.
but
Um,
I'll say that I'll let you keep going on that. But I think that it's interesting in looking at these two. Actually, let's go ahead and rope arm into this because I think
okay.
this is important to the fielding, right? Because if you look at these two guys, I think that the reason why Matt Shaw moved off of shortstop is not necessarily because of his athleticism and his agility and his reason like his ability to field the baseball. I think he can do that at shortstop. It's
Yeah.
because of his arm and his kind of weirder throwing motion that's moved him to a different position.
Yep.
Versus Rojas, I think if he eventually one day gets moved off of shortstop, it won't be because of his arm, it'll be because of his agility and his ability to field the baseball at shortstop very well. So they
Yeah.
move off shortstop for completely different reasons.
Yeah, I think you nailed that. To me, Rojas, the best plays that I see Rojas make are plays that the ball's short in front of him and he has to make a play charging forward. I think he's really good at that. He like, to his credit, to have like the footwork to get those plays done. You got to take a lot of little like small steps together that not a lot of like 18-year-olds sort of figure that out. And I think he does. I think Shaw's better laterally.
Yes.
And that's sort of what you were saying is like the lack of, he's a weird case where we're not saying he can't play shortstop because he doesn't move well side to side. I think he does move like pretty well side to
Mm-hmm.
side. Rojas, I don't know that I've seen enough side to side to have like a strong opinion, but I think what I feel like is that we're starting to like the body is starting to just like go to a place where you can pretty easily project that like the 29-year-old Rojas isn't going to be like the best lateral mover.
Yeah.
Throwing motion, Shaw, that sort of awkward over the top. Rojas, much more traditional sort of infield, like, somewhere like 3/4 ish
Mm-hmm.
arm angle, like lower. I think Rojas this year with errors, it's been a lot of like throws that he's just not taking the throw sort of seriously enough. He's sort of like bouncing it before his first baseman, throwing it a little wide, like stuff that doesn't worry me, stuff that like when you play a little more, I don't know, at the highest level, when you're locked in all the time more than minor leaguers tend to be, I think that stuff will get cleaned up.
Yeah, I think the throwing errors from Rojas are not necessarily a ground ball hit right to him and he just kind of screws up on the throw.
Right.
From what I've seen, it's been a lot of movement. It's been moving up the middle. It's been moving kind of backhand ish, and then pairing that up with the throw. And
Right.
it's like he's putting his all of his effort into getting to this ball to field it, and it's like, oh crap, like now I have to throw it as well, and he isn't putting both elements together, if that makes sense.
It
So it's
does.
not
Yeah.
like just like a gaff on the in the field. It's more just like he's young and still trying to put those steps together a little bit.
What I think's
Yeah,
like what I was thinking about today that I just don't have a great answer on is like if I think about these guys as third basemen
yeah.
and I tried to guess on who would end up a better third baseman, I don't feel like I have a great answer. Like, would you rather a third baseman that moves really well laterally, but the throwing, and you're not super confident in the strength of the throwing arm, but like we're Cubs fans and we saw that like throwing arm at third base doesn't mean as much as like everyone wants to say it does, or like a guy that might age into a worse body but does like sort of have the true sort of shortstop instincts in Rojas. I don't know. I don't have a real strong feeling on that one. And it
So
might be the important question here.
I actually, the way I look at this is kind of interesting because, well, so I want to point out too that as we're saying, Rojas is likely going to move off of short. I think that a lot of those conversations say like, oh, like he's like people go to he's gonna get big and he's gonna have to move to first base. Like that's not what we're saying, right? Like we're not saying like he's gonna get big and move to first base. Like we're saying he's gonna get like stronger and move to short or third.
Yeah.
But I will say we've kind of before the season started, we kept talking Matt Shaw at third, Matt Shaw at third, Matt Shaw at third, because we went into this season at the major league level saying Nico Horner is your second baseman. And what the hell is going on at third base? Is it Nick Madrigal? Is it Chris Morel? Is it Patrick Wisdom? What is happening over there? And so we were saying, oh, Matt Shaw can be your third baseman of the future in Chicago, but also your third baseman of this year, like later
Right.
this year.
Yeah.
Now we're sitting here, and Christopher Morel has kind of figured it. Obviously, he's figured it out offensively, but he's kind of figured it out a little bit, enough to be like passable, enough to be like I feel fine with him playing third base here right now in Chicago. If I were to take the major league team out of the mix here, I'm not accounting for what is happening in Chicago, Matt Shaw is a second baseman. He's not a third baseman. I look at his stature, I look at his throwing motion, I look at his agility moving deep into the hole. Matt Shaw's a second baseman. He's not a third baseman.
Yeah.
And it's weird because he's been playing a lot of third base this year. And I get it. I get that like there's still to this day uncertainty about the major league third base position. But I'm curious to watch Matt Shaw moving throughout the rest of the season to see if he continues to get more time at second base. Not to dethrone Nico or anything like that, but it's like if the dude's a second baseman, maybe he's a second baseman, and then you figure out once he's ready for Chicago how you make it all work then. But in my eyes, I view Matt Shaw as a second baseman, and I view Jefferson Rojas as a third baseman because if he's really getting stronger, if we really believe in that pop taking over at the plate and him showing the ability to have a lot of power, then third base is the move for him. Like we just got done having a conversation with Jefferson Rojas may not be as agile. He may not have as much range. Well, then third base might be your move where you can have some more range at second base, ranging deep up the middle, deep into the hole behind first base, things like that. Third base, you can just be reactionary. You still have to have some range, obviously, but you can be more reactionary as opposed to rangy.
I think that's a really good point. Now, I think it makes me wonder if Morel came out and was just like red hot to start the year, and Nico's slump had lasted a little longer. Would this conversation have sort of morphed into it? So like on its own, would we have just started getting to this point in the way that we like overreact to small samples all the time? Nico, he signed the extension, but it's not a very long extension. So, it's not impossible to say that the Cubs like might need a 2027 second baseman. And yeah, I think you're right to say that could be Shaw, and that maybe that should be Shaw.
Real quick wrench thrown into this. Do you think that either has the ability to play the outfield at any point?
Yeah, I mean Shaw, I think more so. Although no, I'm not even. I think both do. I think it's probably too early to say with Rojas strongly one way or the other. But like Shaw, I don't see why Shaw couldn't play outfield like nowish and be fine at it.
Yeah,
I know Sumac like has said that before, that he thinks that that's his home long term, and that he thinks he'll hit enough that like that'll be totally fine. And I'd follow suit there.
Yeah, I'm with you though. The Rojas, you just can't tell. It's.
And we're talking about major league holes, and like left field certainly doesn't look great. In Chicago right now. Not, I think Ian will be fine, but also another guy that's not signed super long. Almost like what this conversation says to me is that Matt Shaw should also probably be playing some second base and left field this year. I know they're really working on, and I think they're smart to like give him some runway here at third base and really try to get him comfortable there. But like as the season goes along, start exploring second and left a little bit.
Yeah, I actually prefer the development of a guy defensively in getting him 50 games or whatever it is at third base, and then turning around and getting him 50 games at second base, and then turning around and getting him 50 games in left field. I prefer that over, hey, you're playing third base today, second base tomorrow, left field the next day. Like that feels less like, it feels more like chaos and less like development to do it that way. Do it the every day you might be somewhere else.
Yeah, you're not learning. You're versatile, but you're not learning much.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't mind them giving a lot of runway to Shaw at third base right now, and he has played a couple games at second base. I don't have it pulled up in front of me, but he's played some second base too. So yeah, I have no problem with the way that they're developing him defensively at all. So
yeah,
anything else you want to talk about on defense?
No, I think that covered it.
Anything else you want to hit on before I pose the question to you again?
No, I mean, you're going to pose the question to me about, who would I be more upset with the Cubs trading? And there was something that clicked in the last conversation, the last bit of our conversation, where like, I think I went into talking about them today thinking that I was ready to say Rojas was the better prospect. And I think in talking it through today, I'm like, we're jumping the gun a little bit there, and we're using the part of our brain that's like dreaming on the highest end possibilities to say Rojas. And I think when we go through it tool by tool, and I see, how many places Matt Shaw like adds value with intelligence or with what he's done to sort of maximize his body or his skill sets. Like I think he just checks enough boxes that like the present version of Matt Shaw is so solid. The floor is like still good, still high. Don't let like what you perceive as a slow start like take you away from the fact that like this is a dude that just understands how to add value to his team every day. And that is really important. And I guess my answer at the end of this whole experiment is I think Matt Shaw today should still be ranked higher than Rojas. So good. We got something accomplished. How did the conversation evolve things for you?
Yeah, I actually think I'm with you. I think that talking more in depth out loud about something, because when I'm sitting here and I have my pad of paper open and I'm writing down all the rankings, and redoing my rankings and crossing out names and putting arrows to raise a guy up higher and all these different things. I'm still in my head doing it, and that same part of my head that's doing this and not speaking out loud is also telling me like, oh, you can dream on Rojas, you can dream on Rojas,
Yeah.
and being able to say some of this stuff out loud, I think brings me back down to earth. Matt Shaw plays the game of baseball like he's 3 years older than Jefferson Rojas. It just
Hmm.
it not again not a knock on Rojas at all. Rojas plays the game like he's 3 years older than other 19-year-olds,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
But Matt Shaw is just it just feels more comfortable at all time. Like he seems under control at all times. He seems like he knows exactly what he's doing, and it seems like he can switch and do something differently. We talk about the Oppo thing, right? If you told me that Matt Shaw tomorrow came out and said, you know what, I don't want to hit Oppo anymore. I want to pull every single ball that I can. I'd be like, yeah, he could probably do that if he wanted to.
I bet he
And
could.
I don't know that Rojas, for I mean a variety of reasons, could do that where he just kind of flips. He can't toy with us, right? He can't toy with the game of baseball in the way that I think Matt Shaw can right now. So I think that I'm gonna back off. I'm gonna say that I'm gonna rank Shaw above Rojas. But with that being said, dude, they're in my eyes, like you said, they're still the same tier.
Yeah.
They're still the same tier. They're both still, in my eyes, top 100 prospects in baseball. I'd argue that they're both top 50 prospects in all of baseball, but let's again pump the brakes a little bit here. They're both clearly Rojas clearly a top 100 guy, Matt Shaw probably a top 50 guy, and we just go from there.
I think my big questions on each, I'll sort of, maybe I'll cap my part of the conversation by saying, like, if I wonder one thing about each guy, it's with Rojas, and we said it 5 times during the conversation, will he keep growing physically? And I think if he does, I think the sky is the limit. And with Shaw, it's just a question of the inner third against major league pitchers. If you told
Mm-hmm.
me that he's going to cover that and he's going to be a net positive, then I think he's going to have a great career.
Mm-hmm.
If that's a spot that smart pitchers can expose him, particularly high and inside pitches, but now we're shrinking the plate into a really small degree. But um, you know, any advanced scout at the major league level is going to look at Matt Shaw and tell his pitcher jam him in. And
Mm-hmm.
if Matt can turn that into a strength, then then the Cubs got a real one here. And so those are my two the big things I wonder about each, that if those get answered, I believe in their ceilings.
If I'm playing that same game, looking at Matt Shaw, I struggle to give Matt Shaw a an MLB comp.
Mm-hmm.
And in terms of like their playing style, like my question is like, what is Matt Shaw the major leaguer? Like what defines Matt Shaw? Because you kind of point to Nico Horner and you're like, oh, like he's got the same like contact skills and like plays the game hard like Nico, but like he's not Nico Horner because he doesn't play defense like Nico and he's got more pop than Nico.
Right.
You look at Ian Happ, right? The defensive kind of comparisons to Ian Happ. And now he's drawing walks in a way that Ian Happ does. Not that extreme,
Right.
obviously, but like Matt Shaw's not Ian Happ either. There's not. I don't know. Maybe you have somebody, but I can't think of a player at the major league level that Matt Shaw reminds me of, and that can be a good thing. Like he can be Matt Shaw, and that's totally fine.
Right.
But it makes me just like as I'm evaluating him, it's like I don't have anything to compare him to, like any
Yeah.
player that has had his profile that's had success at the major league level. That doesn't mean that he can't do it, but it's just I can't look at somebody and be like, oh, that works. I know that works. Versus Rojas, again, much younger and a lot of changes still to happen. I could see a guy like Rojas, like there's examples of him of a guy that was a shortstop at the lower levels and was a solid athlete and a good approach and all this stuff, and then ended up being a second baseman or being whatever at the major league level. Like there seems like there's more precedent with that than whatever the hell Matt Shaw is. I mean, the best way possible. So
Yeah.
I think that I guess my question to both these guys is like, who are they as major leaguers? And that wrapped up is everything we're trying to do as we're watching minor league baseball players play the game of baseball. Is what are these guys potentially at the major league level?
Yeah. I think if I had to come up with a comp on Shaw today that was like an upside dreamy comp, I mean, there were parts of him when he was drafted where I was like, there's parts of him that like Dustin Pedroia is apt. There's parts of him where I said like Marcus Semien, but like now I don't think the power with those makes it appropriate anymore. Michael Young has always stuck out to me as like I could see some of that career in Shaw. So, that's probably the closest that I can sort of think of off the top of my head that, I could see him having something resembling that career.
Yeah, I dig the Michael Young one. That's good. Because I think that the I want to say Dustin Pedroia. I like Dustin Pedroia, right? Like that's one of my favorite players of all time is Dustin Pedroia. But you're right,
Yeah.
Michael Young probably makes a little more sense. I like that one a lot actually. I mean, it's imperfect, but it makes sense. So, all right, man. Anything else you want to hit on before we wrap this up now? We talked for a full hour about two baseball players.
You guys have our personal guarantee that these are both Hall of Famers. That's that's the important thing that everyone should take away from this.
Exactly. All right, dude. You're still posting over on the Discord, right?
Yeah, I'm trying to stay alive this season, trying to stay involved enough to, to keep being an expert worthy of being on this pod. And we will see if I continue to be able to thread the needle there. But, I'm just grateful that the Cubs minor league community is like as strong as it is. And there's so many people posting great stuff that, when I miss a weekend, there is so much stuff out there. And, not every fan base has that.
Yep. When we miss a weekend, we can go to the Discord, the 1060 West Discord. We can go to Twitter. We can go to wherever. And there's people covering this team. And it simplifies. Instead of me going back and skipping 10 seconds on the video to see each pitch of the game, I'm like, I can't watch Myrtle Beach tonight. Let me go see what Brad or what Michael or what whoever has to say about what Juan Bayo did today or whatever.
Right.
So that is tremendous and one of my favorite things about this entire community. So thank you guys for listening so much. You can find us on Twitter. You can find us on Instagram. You can find us on anywhere where you listen to podcasts. If you were in the YouTube or if you're on YouTube, if you're in the YouTube chat, leave a comment below. Let us know what you think about Jefferson Rojas versus Matt Shaw, upside, ceiling, floor, all that good stuff. Let us know what you think about these two guys because we've obviously had plenty to say, but we want to hear what you guys have to say about it. Hit the like while you're in there. We really appreciate it. Can't thank you guys enough for tuning in. We will be back in your ears in one short week. Thanks, guys.
Go Cubs.
Yeah.